I went to the hospital to look my wife's lover in the eye. I told myself it was about closure. But when I pushed open that door and saw the young man lying in that bed, my legs nearly gave out beneath me, because the face staring back at me from those white pillows was mine. My name is Gerald Parata, and at 63 years old, I thought the hardest chapters of my life were already behind me. I had survived the death of my parents, the collapse of my first business, the slow, grinding years of building something new from nothing. I thought I had earned a quiet life. I was wrong. It started on a Wednesday morning in early autumn. The kind of morning that Wellington does so well, cool and bright. The harbor glittering through the kitchen window, everything looking clean and ordered and right. My wife Helen had left her phone on the bench while she went to water the garden, something she almost never did. She was careful with her phone. Looking back, I understand why. The screen lit up as I was washing my coffee cup. A message from a name I didn't recognize. A name that sat oddly in my chest the moment I read it. Just a first name. Just 3 words beneath it. Thinking of you always. I set the cup down very carefully. My hands were not shaking yet. That came later. I am not a man who reads other people's messages. I had never once picked up Helen's phone with any intention other than to hand it back to her. But I stood there in our kitchen in Karori. 31 years of marriage surrounding me in every direction, her handwriting on the shopping list, her reading glasses on the windowsill, the photo of our daughter Olivia at her graduation pinned to the fridge, and I picked up the phone. The conversation went back 4 months. Hotels in the city. Afternoons that had apparently been spent somewhere other than where I had been told. Words I will not repeat here. Because some things, once read, cannot be unread. When Helen came back inside with muddy gloves and a smile already forming on her face, she found me sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in front of me and nothing on my face at all. She stopped in the doorway. "Gerald." "Who is he?" I asked. Her face did not collapse immediately. There was a moment, perhaps 2 seconds, where I watched her calculating. Then the calculation failed, and what was left was just a woman who had been caught, standing in her own kitchen, mud on her gardening gloves. "Sit down," I said. "Please." She sat. She told me his name was Ryan. She said he was 30 years old. She said it had started in June at a property networking event where she worked part-time helping manage listings. She said she had never meant for it to happen. She said she still loved me. I listened to all of it. I said very little. When she finished, I stood up, got my jacket from the hook by the door, and drove to my office in town. I sat at my desk for 4 hours, achieving nothing. My assistant Diane asked twice if I was all right. I told her I was fine. We both knew it wasn't true. Helen called 3 times. I did not answer. That evening when I returned, she was in the sitting room with her hands in her lap like a woman waiting for a verdict. She said she had ended it. She said she had messaged him that afternoon and told him it was over. She said she would do whatever it took. I slept in the spare room that night. And the night after that, 4 days later, I was at my desk when Diane put through a call she said I would want to take. A woman from Wellington Regional Hospital named Aroha. She told me there had been an accident. She said my wife had listed herself as an emergency contact for a man named Ryan Connolly and that Ryan had been in a serious collision on the Hut Road the previous evening. He was stable, she said, but Helen had been here most of the night and had asked that I be informed. I thanked Aroha and ended the call. I sat very still for a moment. Then something settled in me. Something cold and deliberate. I needed to see this man. I needed to look at the person my wife had chosen to risk everything for and understand what that choice had cost all of us. I told Diane I was leaving early, drove across town, and followed the signs to the regional hospital car park on the 2nd level. The walk from the car park to the ward felt very long. I had no idea what I intended to say. I only knew I needed to be in the same room as this person. I needed to see a face instead of a name on a phone screen. At the nurse's station on the 3rd floor, I gave my name and asked for Ryan Connolly's room. The nurse asked if I was family. I said I was a family friend, that his emergency contact had asked me to come. She checked her screen and directed me down the corridor to room 14. I walked slowly. Room 8, room 10, room 12. Each step felt heavier than the last. I stood outside room 14 for what might have been 2 minutes. I could hear nothing from inside. I told myself, whatever I was about to see, I would remain calm. I told myself I was a grown man of 63, and I had handled worse than this. Then I put my hand on the door and pushed it open. The young man in the bed was unconscious. He had a tube in his left arm, and a dressing on the right side of his forehead, and a cast on his wrist that rested on top of the blanket. His eyes were closed. His chest rose and fell with the steady rhythm of someone sleeping rather than someone hurt, and his face was mine. Not similar, not reminiscent, mine. The same broad jaw, the same slight crook in the nose from where I had broken it, playing rugby at 22, and had it reset badly. The same dark brows that sat heavy over the eyes. My father had those brows. I had always assumed they died with our family line. I grabbed the door frame. A nurse appeared behind me almost immediately. Middle-aged, efficient, a name badge that said Kushla. She asked if I was all right. I told her I wasn't sure. She guided me to the chair beside the bed and crouched down to look at my face with the practiced concern of someone who had seen too many people receive difficult news in this corridor. "Are you family?" she asked gently. "I don't know," I said. And I meant it in ways she couldn't possibly understand. She looked from my face to the face of the young man in the bed. I watched her register it. Watched her try to professionally contain what she was seeing. "The resemblance is quite striking," she said carefully. "Are you his father?" The word landed in the room like something dropped from a height. His father. I looked at Ryan Connolly's hands where they rested on the blanket. Long fingers. The same slight inward curve of the pinky that had made it impossible for me to wear a ring on that finger my whole adult life. My wedding ring had always been on the other hand for exactly that reason. "I'm not certain," I said quietly. "Kushla told me his injuries, a concussion, 2 fractured ribs, a broken wrist, some bruising from the seatbelt. She said he was expected to regain consciousness within the day. She told me Helen had been his primary visitor and had seemed extremely distressed. She said she'd assumed Helen was family. I thanked her. She left. I sat alone with this young man, and I tried to do mathematics that kept refusing to resolve. Ryan was 30 years old. That meant he was born in 1996. In 1995, Helen and I had separated for 6 weeks. It was the worst period of our marriage, and the one we had agreed, when we reconciled, never to revisit in detail. We had been living separately. We had both been seeing other people briefly, cautiously, miserably. I had spent those weeks staying with my mate Derek in Newtown, going through the motions of a life I didn't want. Helen had told me when we got back together that she'd spent some of that time with someone she'd met through a colleague. She didn't give me a name. I didn't ask. We agreed to put it behind us and try again. I pulled out my phone and called her. She answered on the second ring, her voice already frightened. "Gerald, where are you?" "Room 14, I said. "Tell me the truth." "All of it." The silence lasted long enough that I knew the answer before she spoke. "Is he my son?" She said yes. She said it so quietly I almost couldn't hear her over the beeping of the monitor beside the bed. "How long have you known?" "Since before he was born." I closed my eyes. Outside the window, a late afternoon sun was turning the harbor. A flat, beaten gold. Somewhere in this city, my wife had carried this knowledge for 30 years. She had kissed me good morning. She had sat beside me at our daughter's wedding. She had held my hand when my father died. And she had known. "Does he know about you?" I asked. "He found me 8 months ago. He knew he was adopted. His adoptive mother passed away 4 years ago. When he started looking, it didn't take him long. And he doesn't know about me? He doesn't know I'm his father? I never told him who his father was. I told him it was someone I'd been seeing during a difficult time. I didn't give him a name. I looked at Ryan's face. At my face. At 30 years, I would never get back. What was he to you? I asked. When he found you. Was it just guilt? Helen was crying now. It started that way. I met him for coffee. He was so angry, Gerald. So hurt. And then he kept coming back. And every time I saw him, he looked more and more like me. She couldn't answer that. You were sleeping with our son, Helen. He doesn't know that. He has no idea. That doesn't change what it is. I ended the call and sat in the quiet of that hospital room for a very long time. The monitor kept its rhythm. Ryan's chest kept rising and falling. The sun moved across the window, and then the light changed to something cooler and gray. At some point, Kushla came back to let me know visiting hours were ending. She asked again if I was all right. I told her I needed another few minutes. She nodded and left without pressing me. I looked at my son. This stranger who was also the closest thing in the world to me. Biologically speaking, I thought about Tom Connolly, the man who had raised him, who had been there for his first day of school and his first heartbreak, and all the ordinary moments that accumulate into a life. I thought about what it meant that a man I had never met had done the work that was mine to do. I made no decision that night. I simply memorized his face and walked back to the car park. Helen was home when I arrived. She had made dinner out of habit and then left it on the bench untouched. She was sitting in the dark in the sitting room. I turned the light on. "Tell me everything," I said. From the beginning, she told me. All of it. The separation in 1995. The man she'd met through a mutual acquaintance, a carpenter named Colin, who had been kind to her during a time when she felt forgotten. She had fallen pregnant. When I called and asked if we could try again, she had already known for 2 weeks. She had been terrified of losing me. She had been terrified of what the truth would do to the life we were trying to rebuild. So she had made a choice. That was really many choices, compounding over 30 years into something monstrous. Colin had never known the pregnancy continued. She had managed it through her sister's help and a great deal of careful distance. Ryan had been placed with a couple from Palmerston North, good people, Helen said, who had waited years for a child and who had loved him well. I listened to all of it. I asked questions when I needed to. When she was finished, the room was very quiet. "He came looking for you," I said. "And instead of telling him who he was and who his father was, you started a relationship with him. I know how it sounds. How does it sound to you, Helen? When you say it out loud in your own head, how does it sound?" She had no answer for that. We sat in the sitting room until nearly midnight. Then I told her she needed to go to the hospital in the morning and tell Ryan the truth. Not all of it, the part about me could wait, could perhaps wait forever, but he deserved to know that the woman he believed he was in a relationship with was his biological mother. He deserved that much honesty, even if it was devastating. She said she couldn't. I said she could, and she would. She went in the morning. I followed 2 hours later. When I arrived at room 14, the door was half open. Ryan was awake, propped against pillows, looking pale and exhausted. Helen was in the chair beside his bed. He was not looking at her. His jaw was set, and his eyes were fixed on the middle distance in the way people look when they are trying to hold themselves together. I knocked on the open door. Both of them looked up. Ryan's eyes moved from Helen to me, and I could see the question forming before he spoke it. "This is Gerald," Helen said. Her voice was barely holding. "My husband." The word hit him visibly. I watched it move across his face, the confusion first, then something sharper. "Your husband," he repeated. "Yes, you told me you were separated. You told me you'd been on your own for years." "I know. How long have you been married?" 31 years, I said. Because Helen had stopped being able to speak, Ryan stared at me. He looked from my face to Helen's, and then back to mine. Something shifted in his expression that I couldn't quite read. Not recognition, exactly. More like a disturbance. The feeling of seeing something that doesn't quite fit, and not yet knowing why. "Get out," he said. His voice was quiet and controlled, and far steadier than I expected from a man lying in a hospital bed with broken ribs. "Both of you. I've got nothing to say to either of you." Helen stood slowly. She looked at him for a long moment. I could see her deciding, and then not deciding, and then deciding again. "Ryan," she said, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you when you first found me." I said, "Get out. I'm your mother," she said. "Your biological mother." The room went absolutely still. Ryan stared at her. His face had gone the color of the pillow behind his head. "What did you say?" "I was 19 when I had you. I was frightened, and I wasn't ready, and I made a decision that I have regretted every day of my life since. But it's me. I'm the one you've been looking for." I cannot describe what happened to Ryan's face in the silence that followed. It was not a single emotion. It was a sequence of them, moving through him too quickly to track. Disbelief, confusion, horror, grief, and beneath all of it, something that looked like a man realizing the ground he thought he was standing on did not exist. Helen walked out. I don't know where she found the strength to move, but she walked past me into the corridor, and I heard her footsteps slow and then stop somewhere beyond the door. I stood in the room with Ryan. He was staring at the window. He had not spoken since Helen's last word. His hands were gripping the blanket on either side of his body. "I'm sorry," I said. "You deserved better than this." He looked at me. His eyes were wet, but he was not crying yet. "Who are you then?" "Really?" "Gerald Parata. Her husband." That part was true. "Did you know about me?" "No. I found out yesterday. Sitting in that same chair." He processed this. "So you're not involved in any of this. You're not here because she sent you to manage me, or I'm here because I needed to see you with my own eyes," I said honestly. "And because I thought someone should apologize to you properly." He looked at me for a long moment. Then something in his shoulders let go very slightly, the way a person's body does when they stop bracing for the next blow. "She really is my mother," he said. It wasn't quite a question. "Yes. And she knew this whole time. The whole 8 months. Yes. And she still." He stopped. He pressed his lips together. "I feel sick." "That's a reasonable response." He let out a short, disbelieving sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Then he turned toward the window and didn't speak for a while. I didn't try to fill the silence. Some silences need to be left alone. "My whole life," he said eventually, still looking at the window. "I just wanted to know where I came from, who I looked like, whether there was anyone out there who had my nose or my hands, or that ordinary thing that everyone else just takes for granted." He paused. I thought finding her would give me that. I looked at my hands on my knees, at the pinky finger that curved inward, at the hands that matched, the hands resting on the blanket 5 feet away from me. "Did you find any of what you were looking for?" I asked carefully. He turned back from the window and looked at me properly for the first time. Really looked. I watched his eyes travel across my face, the way mine had traveled across his the day before. I watched him register something without yet knowing what to do with it. "You look familiar," he said slowly. "You've been through a concussion," I said. "Rest. Heal. The world will still be complicated when you're back on your feet." He held my gaze for a moment longer. Then he nodded, just once, and leaned his head back against the pillow. I left him to sleep. Helen was in the corridor, sitting on a bench with her coat still on and her hands clasped in her lap. She looked up when I came out. I sat down beside her, but not close. "He'll need time," I said. "Is he?" "He's not all right. He won't be for a while. But he's strong. You can see it in him." She started to cry then. Not the apologetic, strategic crying I had watched her do in the past week. Something older and more fundamental than that. I didn't put my arm around her. I just let her cry and looked at the corridor and thought about all the versions of this moment that might have been different if any one of 1,000 choices had gone another way. We drove home separately. That evening I called our daughter Olivia, not to tell her everything, but just to hear her voice. She asked how I was. I said I was managing. She said she'd been worried because I seemed distant lately. I told her things were complicated but that she shouldn't worry. She told me she loved me. I told her the same. Helen and I separated 2 months later. It was quiet and civil and without the kind of anger that destroys what's left of people. We had been married too long and been through too much for it to be otherwise. She moved to her sister's place in Nelson. I stayed in the Karori house for another month, then sold it and found a flat in Thorndon that looked out over the Botanic Gardens. I thought about Ryan often in those early months. I did not contact him. I had no right to contact him. No claim on his time or attention. No honest explanation for why a stranger was calling to check in on him. I had made a private decision in that hospital room, one I hadn't told anyone and didn't plan to, and I intended to honor it. I tracked his recovery through indirect means. Through what Helen mentioned in the brief practical communications we still had. Through a small notice in a community section of the paper that mentioned his name in relation to a mentoring program for young people navigating the foster and adoption system. I read that notice 4 times. 6 months after the hospital, I saw his name properly for the first time in a publication, a short profile in a regional magazine about people doing work that mattered. Ryan Connolly, 30, had established a support network for adult adoptees seeking to navigate the biological family search process. The article talked about his own journey carefully, without the details I knew, and about how that experience had driven him to create something that might spare others from some of the damage he'd absorbed along the way. There was a photograph. He was smiling in it. The smile was one I recognized from old photographs of myself at that age, before the years added their weight. I cut the article out and put it in a folder I kept in my desk drawer. Over the following year, I watched that folder grow. A grant announcement. A radio interview I found online and listened to twice. An event listing for a public talk he was giving in Wellington. I did not attend the talk. I drove to the venue, sat in my car for 20 minutes, and then drove home. Some lines, once crossed, are impossible to step back from. He called me 14 months after the hospital. I was making toast on a Saturday morning when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Gerald?" A voice that sent a jolt through my chest that I will not attempt to describe. "It's Ryan Connolly. I hope this isn't strange. I got your number from the hospital. I still had it in my phone from when you called before visiting." "It's not strange," I said, though my heart was doing something irregular. "How are you?" "Better. Much better, actually." A pause. "I've been thinking about you, about what you said to me, about deserving better." "I meant it. I know. That's sort of why I'm calling." Another pause. Longer. "I've been in therapy for the past year. working through a lot of things, and my therapist kept asking me, she kept saying there was someone I hadn't addressed yet, someone I'd glossed over in the whole story. And I kept realizing she meant you. Me. You came to that hospital as the wronged party. You owed me absolutely nothing. And you apologized to me. You said I deserved better. His voice was steady but careful. The way people speak when they have rehearsed something because it matters too much to leave to chance. I just wanted to say thank you. And that I hope you've been all right. Because from where I was lying in that bed, you didn't look particularly all right. I stood in my Thorndon kitchen looking out at the gardens and felt something shift in my chest that I hadn't known was still locked in place. I've been managing, I said. Getting there. Good. I'm glad. A breath. Would you be open to coffee sometime? I know it's probably complicated, given everything. But I'd like the chance to talk to someone who knew all the facts and still managed to be decent about it. There's not many of those in this story. I thought about the folder in my desk, about the photograph of him smiling, about the hands that matched mine, resting on a hospital blanket. Yes, I said. I'd like that. We met at a cafe near the waterfront on a Tuesday in early spring. He was already there when I arrived, sitting with both hands around a flat white, watching the door. He stood when he saw me. We shook hands, which under the circumstances was so formally absurd that we both smiled at the same moment. We talked for almost 3 hours. He told me about his work, about the organization he was building, about the complicated grief of losing an adoptive parent before you've had the chance to find your biological family. He told me about the therapy and what it had given him back. He talked about the future with a clarity and steadiness that I found, privately, extraordinary. I told him about the accounting practice I was winding down toward retirement, about my daughter Olivia and her family in Christchurch, about the flat in Thorndon and the view of the gardens and how I had started, in the past few months, to find the solitude less lonely and more like space. He looked at me at one point midway through our second coffee and said, "Has anyone ever told you that you have a very specific look when you're listening? Like you're filing everything." I told him it was an occupational habit from 40 years of working with numbers and people's financial anxieties. He said, "That's funny. I do the same thing. My therapist says I overprocess." The conversation moved on, but I held that moment quietly inside it and did not let go. I have not told Ryan the full truth. That choice does not come lightly to me. I am not a man who finds dishonesty comfortable, but I have made it with full understanding of what it costs and why. The truth of his biological parentage would require him to revisit in a completely new light, a relationship that already caused him serious harm. It would reframe every part of that wound. I do not believe it would heal him. I believe it would reopen something that is only now beginning to close. So I carry it. That is my part of this. What I have instead is a friendship that has grown, carefully and without pretense, over the past 2 years. We meet for coffee once a month, sometimes twice. I have attended 2 events for his organization. He has come to my flat for dinner and eaten reheated pasta and talked until 11 at night. My daughter Olivia met him once, briefly, when she was visiting from Christchurch, and told me afterward that she liked him enormously, that he reminded her somehow of me. I did not explain why. I watch him building a life that has real purpose at its center. I watch him help people who are where he was 5 years ago, lost and searching and carrying questions that have no clean answers. He is better at this work than almost anyone I have seen do it, because he is not speaking from theory. He is speaking from the scar tissue of lived experience, and people can feel the difference. I am 65 now. I live quietly in Thorndon. I have a good relationship with Olivia and her family. Weekend walks along the waterfront. A book group on Thursday evenings that I joined primarily for the social contact and have grown to genuinely value. I have a friendship with a 32-year-old man who does not know he is my son, and who has shown me, without meaning to, what it looks like to take the worst thing that happened to you and make it mean something. There is a kind of fatherhood I have come to understand that has nothing to do with disclosure. It is present in whether you show up, whether you listen properly, whether you tell the truth where you can and absorb the rest in silence, whether, when someone you love is struggling, you say the thing that helps rather than the thing that relieves your own chest. I could not be there for Ryan's first 30 years. That was not my fault and not my choice, but it is the reality I have to live inside. What I can do is be present now, in whatever form that presence is allowed to take, and hope that somewhere in the accumulation of ordinary Tuesday coffees and late dinners and honest conversations, something of value is being passed between us. Helen and I speak occasionally. She is doing better, she says. She is seeing someone who knew her before all of this, and whose steadiness she needs. I hold no bitterness toward her. We were young once and frightened, and we made choices we didn't fully understand the cost of. The mercy I am learning to extend to myself is the same mercy I try to extend to her. I mailed Ryan a card on his 32nd birthday. Nothing elaborate, just a line saying that from what I could see, he was doing the work that mattered, and that the people he was helping were fortunate to have him. He sent back a message that simply said, "Thank you. That means more than you know." I have that message saved. I suspect I always will. There are things we cannot fix. There are chapters that do not get the ending they deserved. There are relationships that can only exist in the shape available to them rather than the shape we might have wanted. The question is not whether you can make it perfect. The question is whether you can make it honest and kind and present. I believe I can. I am trying every day to believe that. And if the greatest gift I can give my son is the freedom to live without the weight of our family's most complicated truth, if the most loving thing I can do is absorb that weight quietly and let him walk unburdened into the rest of his life, then I will carry it, without complaint, without regret. That, more than anything, is what I have learned from all of this. That love is not always loudest when it speaks. Sometimes it is most itself when it holds its tongue and simply stays.